Hi everyone, it's Tracy. Moving my chair, sorry. I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison today of the two versions of the Mythic Oracle that are currently available. This Mythic Oracle I ordered from the book depository, and I was very specific to get the Blue Angel version. And this version did come all the way from Australia, so it did take about 4 weeks to get to me. And then this version is printed by Simon Schuster and came from Amazon, and I got it in 2 days. There are some significant differences between these two decks though, so I wanted to show you what those differences were if you were interested in perhaps getting this deck and knowing whether to get the Blue Angel version or the Simon Schuster version. The content of the guidebooks is basically the same. There is a myth and a message for each card. And as we get into the cards, you will see that each card has a god or a magical being or something like that on it. And then a little message down here, like this one says cycles. You will find that if you find the card that has the message of cycles, the message itself is the same in both the books, even if the card is different between the decks. So the messages are all the same. There is one advantage to the American version. In the back you have a glossary with pronunciations. And these are the anglicized pronunciations of these Greek gods and goddesses. But it's still great to have, because a lot of these words I can't pronounce, and I've read over the glossary several times and I still won't be able to pronounce the names. So it's great to have a resource for that. One of the big differences between these two decks, in my opinion, is the cardstock. The Simon & Schuster American version has really cruddy cardstock. I mean, really flimsy. They're both very shiny. They're both very attractive. You know, it shows the images well, but that cardstock is just awful. Whereas with the Blue Angel deck, you're going to get good quality Blue Angel cardstock. Right off the bat, you do notice that the number one card is different on the two decks. And we will go through that and have a look at that as we go through each of the cards. In the American version, we start with a group of people called the Protogenoi. Now, please pardon my horrible pronunciation. But we start with the Protogenoi, which are like the fathers of the Titans. And that's Uranus, Gaia, Pontus, and Hemera. And then we move into the Titans. And we move into the Olympians after that, then the magical beings and the heroes. The Blue Angel deck doesn't do that. It doesn't include the Protogenoi. It starts straight off with the Titans and then moves to the Olympians, the magical beings, and then the heroes. Notice in the Blue Angel deck that there are a number of cards that have the same god or magical being on them twice. So you'll have two cards for the same god, but the cards will have two different meanings. And I'll show you that in a little more detail as we go through all of the cards. So we're going to start by putting aside the first 4 cards from the American deck. And this is when they start to sync back up again, for a while anyway. So we start with Cronus, and Rhea, Prometheus. Yeah, there's one I'm not going to even try to pronounce. Atlas. All good, all the same. And then you can see that in the Blue Angel deck we've moved on to Zeus, and it's Zeus the father, but it matches the image of Uranus the father from the American deck. And then the next cards actually match each other. You have Zeus, Divine Expansion, Zeus, Divine Expansion, and they're the same image. Okay, here we have Demeter, that's the mother, and here we have Demeter, that's harvest. In the American deck, we have Gaia as the mother. But you'll notice that the next card in the Blue Angel deck is Demeter, the harvest, and it's the same image. Now here we have a guy we haven't seen yet. This is Hades, who is death. We'll find him a little bit later on in this deck. And here we have Hades is the underworld, which isn't exactly the same thing. Then we have Poseidon, and we'll have 2 Poseidon cards in the Blue Angel deck. This is Poseidon the Unknown, and in the American deck, he is Pontus the Unknown. And then we have Poseidon the Earthshaker in both decks. Hermes, Apollo. Here we have Pan, but in this deck, Pan is sexuality, and in this deck, Pan is nature. Hestia. I love that Athena card. That's gorgeous. Okay, this one is going to be significantly different. We haven't seen him yet. So we have 2 Hermes cards, and that Hermes is the messenger. This Hermes is the messenger in the American deck, and this Hermes is travel in the Blue Angel deck. Then we have Aphrodite. We have 2 different Aphrodites. This Aphrodite in the Blue Angel deck matches this Aphrodite in the American deck. This one is beauty. This one is love. And this Aphrodite is love, but we haven't seen that image yet in this deck. We have Eros, it's desire. And we have a second Eros in the Blue Angel deck. And then we have Persephone for awakening. You can see that this matches Hemera, rebirth, in the American deck. And this Persephone in the American deck, which is awakening, is Persephone rebirth in the Blue Angel deck. Clear as mud. Dionysus, Hebe, Iris is harmony, Chiron is healing. And you can see that they didn't, this Chiron is the beginning of the magical beings, and in the Blue Angel deck they changed the border, well, not the border, but the title color, but they didn't do that in the American deck. Pandora is hope. They left off the "the" there. Okay. And then now we have Thanos, who's death in the American deck, who was one of the Hades cards in the Blue Angel deck. We have Achilles, and Orpheus, and Odysseus, and, you know, I want to call him Hercules, but I think it's Heracles, and he's spelled differently in the different decks. So the American deck has it spelled with a C, and the Blue Angel deck has it spelled with a K. Then we have Perseus, and you can see we're at 45, so we've run out of cards over here. Then we have Helen of Troy, who is beauty in the American deck, and that goes with Aphrodite, who is love, in the Blue Angel deck. We have Psyche, Sacred Union, and we have Eros, Sacred Union. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. And then this one, we have Hermes as messages with this image, and he has wings on his helmet. And in the American version, we have Bellerophon, please excuse my pronunciation, meaning humility, and he has no wings on his little helmet. So there you go. Those are the differences in the decks. I think there are good things and bad things about, well, I wouldn't say bad things. They're both lovely decks. But there are pluses and minuses to both decks. If you're a cardstock person, this American deck, it's just so awful. It's just so awful. But I do like that the American deck has taken more characters out of Greek mythology to convey the messages than in the Blue Angel deck, where they doubled up on a number of the characters. And particularly this guy has a great message of humility in his story, his myth story, because there is a myth story that tells you just a tiny bit. This is not, you're not going to learn Greek mythology from these decks, but there's a tiny bit about the myth, and his little myth story is just really fantastic. That you don't get his myth story in this deck because he doesn't exist as a character in this deck. So there you go. There's my comparison of the two available Mythic Oracle decks. The Blue Angel one, the American one. They're both about $15. Make your choice. Have a good day.